Sylvan. I need like a subtitle for Rob. Rob Sylvan.
Hey, hello, welcome. Glad to see you again. It's been a month, huh?
Yes, it's already been a month, at least.
And it's been an exciting month in the Lightroom world, and our topic this month is on import. About import.
This is the Photo Focus Lightroom Hangout.
And we've got two special guests this month. Sharad Mangalick, who is one of the Lightroom product managers, is joining us, and Helen Bradley from ProjectWoman.com is here joining us, and we're going to talk not only just about the new change to Lightroom's import workflow, but what is import and why is it important? Why do we have to do it to begin with? We'll look at some of the workflows that you might be using and some of the details within the panels. We'll look at the old import screen, and we'll look at the new one too, and we'll talk about all of that. So we look forward to your questions. We've got a sponsor this month is HDRsoft, makers of Photomatic. So we thank HDRsoft for sponsoring our Hangout this month. Sharad, maybe you could start. Tell us a little bit about who you are, and you've been our guest before, but just kind of bring anyone up to speed about what you're doing and
sure,
where you're at.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. I think you said that I'm like the only person to have wanted to come back twice or something like that. So I'm really, I guess I'm
They're
honored.
knocking on our doors right now, trying to get back on the show.
I don't know if I should be honored or scared, but hey, thanks for having me back. Yeah, so my name's Sharad. I'm one of the product managers at Adobe. So what I kind of work on most of the time is Adobe Camera Raw, which is of course the raw processing engine across all of Adobe's products, most notably in the develop module of Lightroom, Lightroom Desktop, and then I do work with also Lightroom Mobile and Lightroom Web and kind of building out our whole photo ecosystem. So as a product manager, kind of my job is to talk to folks like yourself, talk to our customers, really understand what people need, how people are using the product, and building the strategy so that we can not just serve your needs, but also kind of grow our customer base and grow our usage and kind of make sure that photos look better everywhere you look. So
yeah, well, and things just keep evolving as well. You can't really stand still. You got to keep
exactly
where the technology's going. And then we have Helen Bradley. So you guys are all on the West Coast. I'm the only one supporting the East Coast here. Helen, I've known you for many years. I'm seeing you at Photoshop World, and I know you write for a lot of different blogs and online, and you've done videos. And so tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are, and what you bring to this.
So thanks, Rob, and thanks very much for having me. I live in California, but by my accent and the flag behind me, you know that I'm not Californian or American. I'm Australian. I've been here 19 years, and what I specialize in is really basically teaching and writing for online sites. I do post-processing for digitalphotographyschool.com. I have a big YouTube channel with Lightroom, Illustrator, and Photoshop videos, and I just do a lot of training and writing for online sites in the photography, Photoshop, Lightroom area, as well as in Illustrator.
Excellent. Well, we're really happy to have you here.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
If Donald Trump is elected president, will he be shipping you back home?
If Donald Trump's elected president, I might be on the flight back home. Robbie might need to pay my way. It might be me going.
Sorry, don't mean to go political. Just had to say that. So, all right. Well, I also want to quickly point out that the way we give away a prize. We're giving away a copy of Photomatics to a lucky winner today, and I want to say that we do this by we pick the winners from our people who ask questions. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So this is something that some people get stuck with. So this is the Hangout page, the event page for this Hangout. And you can see there's a little Q&A there. If you're watching this live from the Photo Focus website itself, where it's just embedded in there, you want to jump over onto the event page on Google+. And then once you click the play button, you will start to see the actual Hangout itself, and up in the top here is this little grid of icons here. Click on that, and you'll get the Q&A pod will come up on the right. Then you can ask your question, click this button, and then we'll see that over on our side, over here, and we'll be pulling your name from that for the winners, but we'll also be answering your questions. So any questions you have for any of us about Lightroom in general beyond import, we're happy to hear those as well. And so let's get started talking about what is import. What's the purpose of this part of the Lightroom workflow? Maybe throw that to you, Sharad, to get started.
Sure.
When you've answered a million times.
It's actually a fairly critical one because import is the act of actually bringing your files into Lightroom, and that's making Lightroom aware of where your files are, and preparing them so that you can actually do things like organize and edit them. So you're not moving your files into Lightroom, even though it's called import. They're still on your disk. You can choose where you want them to be, where you want your files to be. We recommend that you pick kind of one organizational scheme, whether it's state-based or event-based, and stick with it. Bad things happen if you switch back and forth because then you have no idea where anything is and finding them. And so, import is really just the act of making Lightroom aware of where your files are, so that we
like
can
the
do
way
cool
you're
things.
phrasing that. Making Lightroom aware of where your files are. That's important. That everybody understands that your pictures are not in Lightroom.
Yeah.
I've said this a couple times. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, it's one of the things. I mean, I've been doing Lightroom help desk support since NAP started supporting Lightroom when Lightroom 1 first came out, and it's the whole concept, the whole Lightroom paradigm hinges on understanding this import process, because if you don't, it's going to lead to problems down the road. And the way I always think of it is, you go to a party or you go to a business meeting, or you go to a trade show, and you meet someone, you shake their hand, and maybe you give them a business card, or they just say, "Hey, where are you from?" That's what Lightroom's doing with your photos. It's being introduced to your photos. It's finding out some information about them, like where do you live? Oh, I live at this particular path on the hard drive. That's where I live. And maybe there's some metadata that gets also brought in about shutter speed and ISO, and maybe some adjustments if you had a preset applied, or any of that information, GPS information. All that information gets brought into the catalog. The photo stays wherever it actually lives, just like when you meet someone, you don't move to their house after you meet them, you stay at home, but they know a little bit more about you. So Lightroom is just this catalog, this database, and it's this handshake is what import's all about. And so that is, if you can wrap your mind around that, I think the rest of your Lightroom workflow gets a lot easier.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, it's one of those things where people spend a lot of time, I think, thinking about it, and sometimes maybe even overthinking about it, whereas I think it's just, maybe on a napkin or a piece of paper, figure out where you want your photos to generally live, and then just set Lightroom up. It's fairly simple to do it. It's sticky, so you do it once, and then every import will do the exact same thing, and your life or your photographic life will be much happier for it. So.
Yeah. I had I store my photos sometimes on an internal hard drive, sometimes on an external hard drive. Really depends on the system I'm working on. But whatever drive my photos happen to be on, I keep them all in a single parent folder that I just call imported photos. And that way I know that these are the photos that have been through this handshake, through this process. And I can look at them outside of Lightroom, but I'm not going to mess with them. I'm not going to rename them or move them or delete them outside of Lightroom. That way, I do all the management stuff from within Lightroom. That way, it keeps that database, that catalog, up to date with what's actually going on with the photos.
Yeah, for me,
we got a question.
If I want to do anything with pictures on my computer, if I want to show you a photograph, I'm going to open Lightroom to do it. It just keeps things simple.
Yeah. We got a question in already from Anthony. Is asking, he shoots RAW plus JPEG, and he's asking, is there a way so that it can be changed to only import the RAW and not both? Well,
yes.
So I guess no. Well, yes and no. It's one of those things where
no, there's a checkbox.
There is. And you do just see the RAW, but the JPEG comes along for the ride. I guess that's my caveat that I'm hemming and hawing over.
Not when we're importing, though, right? Because if we go to preferences, that little checkbox.
Yeah, you want to show it?
Oh, okay, I'll show it. I'll show it. Here we go. Screen share.
This is something we're really good at. We talk about Lightroom, and then we start doing all these hand signals
That's
about
right.
trying to represent what it does, instead of actually just showing it, since we have the technology to do that.
Can you see my screen?
So yeah, so
everybody should be seeing my screen here.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Now I see it.
So you go up to Preferences, which if you're on a PC is under the Edit menu. That'll be down there. On a Mac, you click on the Lightroom menu and go to Preferences. And then right here under General, this little button that says Treat JPEG files next to RAW files as separate photos. If you uncheck that, it won't import the JPEGs. If you check it, it will import the JPEGs.
Well, yeah, I mean, so...
Am I mistaken?
Here's where I'm...
Correct me,
No,
Rob.
you're not mistaken. I'm being pedantic, I guess. But so if you think of import as what you actually see in Lightroom, then I guess you're correct, because you would see and you would be interacting with just the raw photo. But you also have to know that the JPEG came along from the memory card to wherever you chose to have the raw photo stored, and that it's sitting there on your hard drive. You're just not seeing it inside of Lightroom. All right. So what you would see instead is just the raw file, and in the grid view you would see raw plus JPEG or PNG plus J. You know, whatever, you would see that, and you're essentially if you're not interacting with the JPEG at all, what's the point of bringing it in, of even having it on your hard drive, right? It's just sitting in the background.
Are you saying that when I check that box, it imports the JPEG but doesn't show it to me?
When you have the box unchecked, it's copying it. Let's use the right word. It's copying it to your hard drive, all right? But you're only seeing the raw photo, and you're interacting with just the raw photo.
Really? I thought it was only importing the raw at that point.
Let me
Yeah.
so let me do a little research on this, because admittedly I don't shoot RAW plus JPEG, so it's been a long time since I've touched it. Let me get a definitive answer, and I'll send it to you guys.
Because I also frequently shoot RAW plus JPEG in order to get the black and whites from my camera brought right in with my RAWs. And I thought that import dialog is only going to import what I see in the grid view. And if I uncheck that box, then I don't.
So the JPEG's in there, because if you go back into that preference and you check that box to treat them as separate, right, and then you run the synchronize folder command on that folder, you'll bring in all the JPEGs. They're there. They're sitting in the folder. You're just not seeing them inside of Lightroom. You just see the raw file. Because every time I do a new every time I do a new camera book, I shoot RAW plus JPEG to get both.
Yeah.
And then I have to do that. So Anthony, that's a long answer to your question. So the short answer is, by default, Lightroom only will show you the RAW, but the JPEGs it treats it like a sidecar file. It treats the JPEG like a sidecar file. All right? And you don't see it inside of Lightroom. You don't interact with it when you're doing develop stuff, but it's in there.
Sam Cox is back up there too. Man, I'm
Thanks, Sam. Yeah. So my recommendation, if you're shooting RAW plus JPEG, is to have that preference that Levi showed, have it checked to treat them as separate. That way you can at least then choose to get rid of the JPEGs if you don't want to keep them anymore. So there you go. It would be nice if for people who are doing that on the import dialog, if you could separate the RAW from the JPEG, sort them that way on the import screen, and then only choose the RAW file. That would be nice. But I don't know how often people shoot that way. So, good. More questions. So Sam says, agrees with me, that's great. David is asking, why can't we, upon import, make a second copy to a folder of our choice rather than Lightroom mumbo jumbo? Name the file doesn't mean anything to anyone. All right, so David's asking, all right, so let me jump over to Lightroom, and I'm going to show the old import screen, and we're going to talk about this a little more in detail. So I'm running Lightroom CC 2015.11, and this was before the update that changed the look of the import screen, okay? And we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. But what he's referring to is the make a second copy to option here, All right, and when you check that box, the way I think about this option is that Lightroom is saying, hey, look, right now your photos are only on your memory card. They're only in this one little tiny wafer of silicon, and that's not a really safe place. So during this process, where you might also copy those photos to some other location, some other hard drive, all right, why don't I do you a favor and also let you copy them to a second hard drive, all right, so that by the end of this import handshake process, you've got your photos in 2 different locations. That way you can take the memory card out, format it, keep shooting. Makes sense, right? But this make a second copy too is not really intended to be a long-term backup solution, right? It's a backup of the memory card. At least that's the way I think of it. It's a backup of the memory card. At that point in time, Lightroom doesn't go back ever and update this second location with changes you make after the import process is done. So say you go through it, you import, and then you delete some of the really bad out of focus lens cap shots like I have. Lightroom doesn't update that location. If you go and make a copy that you sent to Photoshop for additional editing, that copy is not replicated in this second location. It's just a archive of the memory card at that point in time. So what Lightroom does, and to go back to his question, it just creates this folder based on the date of the import process and leaves it to you to manage it over time. Whether you delete them or you keep them as some kind of a special frozen-in-moment archive of your memory card. All right. So anybody want to add anything more to that? That's just kind of my approach to.
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of explain why it even exists, because I think we get a lot of questions about that, and it's sometimes confusing. So back when Lightroom was first introduced, almost 10 years ago, actually copying files from the card was surprisingly fragile, and there was sometimes corruption between when you copied from the card directly to your hard drive. And that was something that wasn't just Mac or Windows specific, it was just endemic to card readers and cards at the time. And so this was really to try and protect you so that, if you are copying it from your images from the card, then you actually have 3 copies, because you have the card itself, you have the second copy that's, archived somewhere, you just keep it, and then you have the one on your actual local hard drive. And so it's just kind of a safety protection. And so what most people tend to do is, once they've verified that the files are on their actual hard drive, that there is no corruption, you can kind of blow away that second copy. It's just kind of a redundant copy just for, that peace of mind. It was never intended to be a long-term archive.
Yeah. All right. That's very helpful. So hopefully, David, that answers your question for why it's not something that you can configure the name for, because it's really not meant to be something that you do over a long period of time. What you really need to think about is some other long-term, full system type of a backup process that includes your photos over time and all the changes that you make over time. So in that process of showing that import screen, I mentioned that I was using Lightroom CC 2015.1.1, which would be the equivalent of Lightroom 6.1 if you're not a Creative Cloud subscriber. When, I guess, it was about a month ago or so now, sometime since our last Hangout, the Adobe released an update, as it does, for both Lightroom 6 and Lightroom CC 2015 that included new camera support and new lens profiles and bug fixes. And it also made some changes to the import screen. And I wanted to ask Sharad, and probably some other people are wondering too, just about some of the thinking that went, for the reasons why you wanted to make that change, what problems were you trying to solve with making that change. And I will also say that the reaction from the Lightroom community was a little on the negative side. People are resistant to change anyway, but so that's probably part of the process. But there were some significant changes between these 2 versions. On Lightroom Journal, if you don't follow the Lightroom blog, you really should. It's a great way to stay up to date with what's happening right from the Lightroom team. And I'll put that link in the Hangout on the event page for this Hangout. But there's some really good information about what they were trying to do. Maybe Sharad could share some of that. And there's also an announcement made that they're going to, in the next update, we don't know when that's going to be, they're going to revert back to the functionality in 6.1 and 2015.1. So Sharad, what can you tell us about that process?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think the biggest thing is kind of walking through our thought process, which is what you had asked about, so I'm answering the question. So the biggest thing was, we've talked to a lot of customers, and, we have a core group of people that are using Lightroom every day, and then we've got a bunch of people that try Lightroom, but, they run away from it as fast as they can, And we sit in these rooms, and these are like, they're not, I don't think of them as like less sophisticated photographers. They've got all the best gear, got fantastic work. They're people that present in galleries. They're, people that when you think of like should be using Lightroom, like they should be using Lightroom, but they're not. And so when we walked through, what their experience inside of Lightroom is. When they got to the import dialog, which is largely one of the most critical dialogues inside of Lightroom because it tells Lightroom where your files are,
Right.
They just recoiled in fear, and they literally would push themselves away from the table, and they're like, "I'm done. Sorry guys, like my head's exploding. I can't figure this out." And these are like really smart people. Like, they're awesome photographers. They're smart people. It was too much. And the sad thing was that it's weird because they didn't actually see that Lightroom was the fault. Like they would apologize that they weren't smart enough to use Lightroom. And everyone that we talked to, either in person or like I would get follow-up emails like, "Yeah, sorry, like Lightroom's just it's too complicated for me. I'm not smart enough to use it. Like I can't spend enough time trying to figure this out. Like sorry guys." And so it was one of those things where it was kind of this light bulb moment for the team where I was like, okay, we know that, we don't really love the current import experience. The current, when I talk to say current, I mean the one that we're reverting back to. We don't really love that. It's something that most people that use Lightroom kind of begrudgingly put up with because it's what we have. And so we looked at this as like an opportunity to kind of rethink, okay, why do you import? And how can we make it either easier, faster, or more streamlined? And that's what we were trying to tackle. I think we, judging based on the feedback, I don't think we hit the mark on it this time. So, but it's one of those things where I'm really glad that we went down this path because it's something that we learned a ton from. And, we know that import is still, not the most satisfying experience, and it is such a critical experience. And so it's something that we need to figure out.
So was part of the thinking around, like, there were some removals of certain features. Was that part of the streamlining thinking? Was like, how can we just make this simpler so that people can get through it more quickly if there's fewer options to have to wade through? Is that part of what you're saying?
I think that's part of it. I think a lot of it is, when I talked about like 10 years ago when Lightroom was first created, the 10th anniversary of the first public beta was just in January or February next year. So time flies. But I think the one thing that there's a lot of options in there that made sense at the time. That when you look at it, they don't make a ton of sense now. And so and so we looked at it and we said, okay, well, if we're trying to build Lightroom in a way where it's going to not just last for the next year, but we're trying to figure out how to make Lightroom relevant for the next 15 or 25 or for the foreseeable future. We have to kind of think about this fresh and like what options make sense, what don't make sense, and and many of the options at the time just didn't seem to make sense, and so that's why they weren't there. Clearly, we overshot.
Yeah.
Well, and we appreciate it though. We appreciate that you're actively trying to make it a better experience.
Yeah.
And that's great.
Yeah, and I think it's really great that you're soliciting a lot of feedback. Obviously, you're doing focus groups. Obviously, you've probably gotten a lot of feedback right now since the change. Is there a single way for people who wanting to give more feedback can effectively do that? Is it through one of the forums, the Lightroom Journal blog page? What do you recommend for people who really want to give you some information?
Yeah, all of those
Positive,
things. So, yeah, positive, negative. I mean, it's. I think if you took a picture of me from the last Hangout and went to this one, I've got a lot less hair and it's more gray now, and it's.
Yes,
But
yeah.
I think yeah, we've got a bunch of feedback forums on like Git satisfaction. We have the Lightroom journal. I can't figure out how to make the lower third thing work. Otherwise, I'd give you guys my Twitter handle if you guys could maybe put it in the notes. That's directly
I
to
will.
me.
I'll put all those links out there for folks who want to stream more. And if you have something you'd like to ask Sharad right now, please jump in the Q&A. We've got some questions coming in and some comments, so please keep doing that, because that's how you get to win our prize at the end too. So thanks to HDRSoft for that.
Yeah, and there's a question about when it's going to happen. So one of the things that we're actually doing, one of the problems with this last release is that one, we made a bunch of changes, and two, there were a bunch of bugs that kind of slipped out. And so with the next release, we're being very deliberate about it. We want to make sure that when we do release, that we actually release with the highest quality, so that we don't run into the same issues. And so it's not a matter of just flipping a switch. It's there's a lot of work that's going in that the team's going through right now, just to make sure that when we do go out, we're not sitting on it for any particular reason. That's what I'm trying to say. So.
Yeah, and unfortunately, around the same time when this update came out from Adobe on Lightroom, Apple updated the operating system on the Mac and introduced some other issues that were not really welcome as well. So it was a bit of a combination of new updates there for some folks on the Mac side that upgraded to El Capitan that didn't really help them, like with tethering and some other things like that. So I know people are looking forward to that release, but if you don't need the new camera support that came in this release, in the link I'll put on the event page here, Adobe has the steps. They wrote out all the steps. If you'd like to roll back to the previous version, you can certainly do that. And if you want to just continue on, once you've got your head around the new screen, you can continue to use that as well. People are using it. It's not like it's once you understand it, and as long as you didn't lose something that you absolutely need in your workflow, you certainly can still continue to use it.
Well, let me just clarify that last point. So in the next update, what we're calling the new import screen won't be in there. It'll just be so you won't have the option of choosing the new versus the old. It'll just be the classic import screen.
Thank you.
That people apparently love more than we do. So.
Well, that's too bad. I mean, I feel like we've voted out by being a noisy and surprised minority, we've voted out improvement, and I feel like that's really too bad.
I think in the long term, I think it's a good thing. The whole process. I think that it's good to see that Adobe's trying to push the envelope, trying to streamline the process, trying to help new users. That's all great. The fact that they were so responsive, so immediately responsive to the outcry about how this came out is fantastic. I think that restored a lot of faith in folks, and that they're willing to actually roll back, because I mean that represented a lot of work on their part. I mean, it was not something that no one there just did overnight and said, let's just throw this out. I mean, there was I'm sure a lot of work on the development side, on the research side. So I mean, all of that I think will hopefully bear fruit in the future in a better experience for everybody. So I think I'm optimistic. I take the long view. I think overall it's going to be good for all of us. So let's just take a couple of questions. We're about halfway through our. It
looked like Helen had something to weigh in there.
Sorry, Helen. Please
I was just trying to move some things that are glaring in my face here.
Oh, I saw that.
I guess in all of it, there were a couple of things that were removed that are sort of big issues. Things like not being able to eject the camera card when you're importing. There are some things there that really, even if we were to embrace the new import process, there are a couple of things there that are sort of glaring issues. I think the second one that's a glaring issue is not being able to see that folder structure and see where your images are going. The original import screen was really good at showing you if you were about to make a really spectacular mistake, because you could see it and you could you could not press that import button and just think again about where things were going, and not having that visual feedback, I think, you know, a lot of people are going to find that's a really big issue.
Yeah, so you're saying that the contextual clues that the original import screen had about the destination you found helpful in understanding the bigger workflow.
Well, better than that is that they told me, and they told users if they're about to do something really stupid. You know, if you look down there in that contextual screen and saw your folder structure and saw that the card full of images was about to be broken up into 31 different day folders, you know, you just took a look at that and said, well, wait a minute, you know, is that really what I want to do? Well, answer probably no. But you got the chance to sort of see where things were going, and if you looked there, you got heads up that something spectacularly wrong was about to happen, or, you know, things were perfect and yes, click the import button. But for one, I think that visual clue missing is a really big issue, and, you know, just not importing that, not ejecting that camera card was another issue. You know, it's like, how many times have I pushed a camera card out of a slot and got that error message, and you just don't want to destroy camera cards that way, you know. If you're using Lightroom, chances are you want to just use Lightroom to do the import, and when you're finished, get rid of that camera card.
Interesting.
Let me just show
that action.
Oh, do you really?
I do.
The eject. Let me just show what Helen is saying. So this is the original import screen, and the organize option here is set to by date, and these are photos that were taken over a period of time, and so we can see those folders appearing in italics within this tree to show where they're going to land and what they're going to be called, and I do think that is helpful for understanding that part of the process.
I think better would just be to not have the by date as the default.
Well, no, don't go there. You're going to start a whole new storm of people who rely on the by date option.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
Yeah.
That's all right.
So let's see some other questions. So, is there a way to get Lightroom to not import files from a memory card that have been previously deleted? So, I have a memory card. I shoot. I import them. I don't format the card. I shoot some more. But in the process of when I go back to import the new photos, I've deleted some of the bad ones, and those get re-imported. I don't know of any way to have that happen. What?
Yeah, well, just unselect those during the import the import grid.
Well, sure. Yeah, Lightroom doesn't remember after you delete.
Right.
It doesn't have anything to compare it to. So yeah, so you'd have to manually remember that. That's often what I do. I try to be more regular in formatting the cards between those, so that doesn't happen.
Right.
But yeah. Because what Lightroom does,
I was just going to say, I think it's a good idea to try and get in the habit of formatting your card after you import, so that, you know, because we've seen, you know, our customer support gets a handful of calls every month because cards get corrupted after, you know, plugging them into your computer and then plugging them back into the camera. Something funky happens, and so the last thing we want to see is that someone's like precious memories or that photo shoot of that wedding that you took, you know, is corrupted because you didn't format. It's really easy to format.
So the good answer there is to more frequently formatting the card, so you get rid of the old images, and then if you do delete some and they're still on the card, then you have to kind of be paying attention to that. You know, one of the things from being on the help desk for all these years that I feel where people get into a lot of trouble is that they aren't in the driver's seat for a lot of the decisions that are being made. I mean, Lightroom is only doing what people tell it to do, but a lot of times people aren't fully aware of what they're telling it to do.
Right.
And sometimes, you're tired, you've been a long day or whatever, and you're not thinking about all these things, or maybe you're feeling overwhelmed looking at all the options. But it's those times when Lightroom is just doing what it's configured to do, and we're not aware of it, that seems to be where a lot of the problems get created after the import process is done.
David Jones did have a good idea here that if you used move instead of copy, then that would remove the photos from the card, and you wouldn't.
You can't move from a card.
You can't. It's not
use the move option.
Okay, it's only
move is not an option with a memory card.
Okay.
If you have a memory card selected as the source up in under devices there, move is going to be disabled. And Move was removed from the in the
when you
update.
import.
Move isn't an
I
option.
can't recommend using it for most of the time. So.
Yeah, well, I know of some people who rely on it because they have a workflow where that just makes sense for them. It's maybe more on the edge case side than the predominant use case, but those people use it and they're happy about it. I mean, I think it's always hard with any software product where you have something, some feature, function, checkbox, smiley face, whatever, even when like the panel end marker, whatever the littlest thing is, there's probably somebody who gets married to using it, and if it goes away, they're going to be sad. All right. So another question. Sam Cox is asking in the Facebook Lightroom help group, which is an excellent. If you're on Facebook, there's a great group called the Lightroom help group on Facebook, and a lot of great people in there. Sam's one of them. Victoria Bampton's been in there, Laura Shu, and myself, and a lot of really great people helping people out in there. And Sam's asking, the solution to many recently posted problems is to disable GPU acceleration. Are improvements in the works for this feature? I'll have to throw that at Sharad. I don't.
So one of the things with GPU support is that we rely on drivers that the vendors put out, and so we've been working with a lot of the vendors, NVIDIA, AMD, Microsoft, Apple, Intel, just to make sure that these types of issues. So most of the reasons why people disable GPU and see gains is because their driver's either out of date or there's something wrong with the driver. And so we're working with all the vendors, and it's really important to us that obviously that we have support, and it's important to them because they know how many people are actually buying machines for GPU. And so make sure if you're on Windows that you're checking for updates. I don't think Windows automatically does the GPU driver, so you may have to go to your card vendor's website, whether it's Intel or AMD or NVIDIA, and download the latest driver from there. On Mac, all of the updates are just sent through Apple. So just make sure you're updated, because that's the biggest thing that's going to make the performance a lot better. But yeah, it is a target that we are, of course, trying to improve every release. And, I don't have a specific list in front of me that I can talk to, but it's something that's, of course, on our minds.
Cool.
All right. So Ken asked about the GPU, and David Jones right below that asked about that, so I think that kind of addressed that one there. Michael is asking about Adobe's design philosophy behind the new import process. Was it the first step in trying to coalesce the desktop and mobile versions with one universal method? I don't know. Sharad, do you have any thoughts beyond what you've already shared on that?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily look at it as like, okay, let's make desktop look more like mobile, or let's make mobile look more like desktop. I think it was more just looking at, what do modern apps tend to look like, and what are the experiences that people want to use, and trying to make Lightroom's UI kind of conform to these standards that are prevalent in apps that people are using these days on the desktop. And so one of the other things that we're seeing, which is specific on the Windows platform, is that touch-enabled devices are becoming really, really popular. And when I say touch-enabled, I don't mean like Windows phones, but rather these they're laptops, but I don't even know what they're called now. Like they're these hybrid touch laptops.
Right.
The Surface
yeah,
Pro.
like that's probably one of the most important ones, but there's a whole host of them, and they're becoming really, really
HP has a lot of wonderful tools that.
Yeah, and so one of the things with Lightroom's experience and interface is that it's just not very touch-friendly, and so we need to invest in that space, before it becomes so popular, because by the time it's really, really popular, it's too late to just get started. So we need to make improvements every release to kind of address that. So I think there's a whole bunch of trends. But it wasn't necessarily around how do we make Lightroom look like Lightroom Mobile or vice versa.
Yeah. And they're both going to be continuing to evolve as the technology evolves as well. I mean, that's just a given. Dan is asking, why not make the simplified import the default, but allow a change in preference to the in-depth import for those like myself that want it all. So I guess he's saying, have the one in 6.2, but also have the old one, and a preference setting might switch between the two. Is that a viable potential?
It's possible, but it's, from at least development perspective and testing perspective, that's kind of a worst case scenario. And so we're not confident that we can do that in a way that addresses all the quality concerns that we had with this release. And so for the next one, there won't be a switch. Maybe in the future we can figure it out, but it's not going to be something that, at least in the short term.
Yeah, because something like that, it's not just a window dressing look. It's really pretty core functionality that has to work and be tested and be sound on no matter which route you take. You're not just kind of changing the wrapper around it, I guess. So.
Yeah, and I mean, there's actually a lot of power that was baked in that I don't think a lot of people actually understood. So going back to the research that we did, and talking to customers and talking to photographers, we know that there's a core group of Lightroom people that actually know exactly where each file is. Where they're actually going through the destination tree like Helen was showing, and like, oh, do I actually want it in 31 folders or no? But the vast majority of photographers don't actually know where a lot of their files are and their photos are. They've just relied on software to kind of show them where they are. And so to kind of manage it. And so when we look at customers that are coming from competitors or even using other forms of Adobe software, we said, okay, well, pick a folder of your images, and let's bring them into Lightroom just for the purpose of this test. And they kind of looked at us blankly, like, huh? I don't know where my photos are. Like, you should tell me where my photos are. And so, as part of that add photo screen, and I totally agree, we should be able to tell them where their photos are. There's one of the that add photo screen is actually doing a scan on kind of known locations or places where people tend to have photos, so that we can make it easier for people that have no idea where their files are to bring them into Lightroom.
Yeah. Helen, I have a question I'll throw to you. Robert Keane is asking, kind of at the bottom here, he's confused. One of the tutorials he's seen, read, suggested that a person would copy your photos into a folder of your choice from the camera or from the card, and then point Lightroom to that folder and import from that way. So instead of importing from a memory card, you do the copy from the memory card to a folder outside of Lightroom, and then you import the folder. And he's asking if that makes sense. Have you seen that type of a workflow?
Actually, that would have been my suggestion if you're using the new import process, is probably if you really want to have some control over the situation, is that you do create a folder, import your photos into that folder first, and then point Lightroom at that folder and import them, because that gives you a way of actually knowing where your photos are. I think there's a second reason that some people will do that is, for example, if you're doing a wedding shoot and you're coming home with 4 or 5 cards, then you might want to make a folder, dump all your photos into that folder, and then import them into Lightroom, because things like the previous import collection will then work on the entire group of wedding photos rather than on just the last card that you imported.
That's a great idea.
So, I think there are some use cases there for it. They're probably not every day, except if you're an event or wedding photographer or a school photographer where you want to, for example, at that point, go and keyword your entire last import, and then if you're working on a group of files. And, maybe if you've got, that's probably it. That's probably what I'd be looking at.
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah, I've seen some Lightroom instructors teach it that way for the main reason of helping people, to what Sharad was saying, understand where your photos actually are on your hard drive, to be really in the driver's seat for that part of the process. Can you do that with Lightroom's import? Yeah, you certainly can, but if that part is really hard for you to understand in the beginning of your Lightroom experience, and you're used to using a file browser like Bridge or Finder or Windows Explorer, then you can just do the old copy-paste from the card to a folder and then point Lightroom at that folder, and that helps, I think, marry in your mind what's happening behind the scenes. And so I think that does make sense. there's always more than one way to do these things, and I think if that helps you understand it, then yeah, by all means, go that way. I have to say, from doing the help desk, 90% of the work I do is helping people understand what they did with their photos after the import process is done.
Yeah,
They really, some people really just don't know what's going on.
I think
Go ahead,
that's a
Helen, you were
big
saying something?
disconnect. Yeah, I think that's a big disconnect, Rob. I think that, with Lightroom and where we're looking at helping photographers who are photographers, they go out and shoot photos for a living, they're not computer experts, is that there are a lot of people out there with rudimentary computer skills who are really struggling to get a grip on where their photos are. And these are really precious things. I mean, if you ever look at that Lightroom help group and the number of people who come home with really important shoots like family events or weddings and stuff like that, and who spectacularly managed to lose their photos in the first 10 minutes, that's a real problem. These are precious memories, and their lack of computer skills are really hampering being able to manage those photos properly. Yeah. Or even know where they are, as you say.
Sure. All right, we got about 10 minutes left in our Hangout. If you have any other questions or comments and you want to be entered to win, please send those in via the Q&A pod.
Even just weigh in and say hello, and that'll enter you in the draw.
Yeah, you don't have to wax poetic. You can just be friendly. Sharad, here's a question that you might be able to address. So, David Jones is asking about why did Lightroom shy away from beta testers before it shipped. I guess he means like having the beta releases for each of the updates. And he appreciates the efforts and the upgrade, and he just didn't want to eliminate what works. Any thanks, Helen? That's a big thanks to Helen.
Hey, I'm here too, guys. Thanks. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, it just came down to, we found that it was a lot of work, and there were some people that used it, and we just wanted to put our resources more towards getting the final release ready. And so we went from, these, we call them release candidates,
Right.
and we kind of stopped doing the release candidates in order to just get more coverage on the actual release, and with the goal of trying to get that into market, into customers' hands, camera support out faster. And we found that seemed to be working fairly well, although maybe we need to revisit that with this last release. So.
Can you speak at all with what I've been reading on Lightroom Journal's blog from what Tom had written, after the update and the response to it, and he kind of hinted that there might be more opportunity for dialogue or communication as around this process. Is that something that might happen in a release candidate type of way, or is it just more of feedback through the various channels that you might incorporate? Is there anything more you could shed on that?
I don't think we have a specific plan in terms of like, okay, well, 6.3 or 2015.3 will be a release candidate, and then
right.
a public beta or anything like that. It's more just, one thing that we've learned, which is not surprising to anybody on this call or anyone listening, is that photographers have very strong opinions. And so, they can be like the quietest people and never say anything, but then as soon as you talk about photography, or as soon as you talk about software like Photoshop or Lightroom, they'll talk your ear off. So, I think there's a lot of opportunities for getting feedback, and I think we just need to do a better job of, collecting it, understanding it, and making sure that we understand not just what people are saying, but what are they actually trying to get at. Because I think that's the key. It's not just listening to, I want this feature, but trying to understand why they want that feature, so that we can kind of be more, think about it more holistically.
Yeah. All right. My experience is that people they figure out a way of doing something, and then they want to just keep doing it. And so if there's an interruption in that tends to be what causes people to freak out. My experience with photographers is that they're busy, they're trying to spend as little time as they can behind the computer and more time shooting, and so when there's any kind of wrinkle in their workflow, it really has an escalating effect on the rest of their experience. And I think that's where you see a lot of that passion in the commentary that comes up. Michael is expressing sadness that the new import is going away to roll back. He thinks it has a lot of potential, so that's great. So maybe, you know, I don't think we're done seeing some kind of change there. So maybe, you know, Michael, we'll see something like that come back again. Time will tell. Robert is thanking us for answering the question about transferring the card. He also used several, a lot of people when they travel, they use iPhones, multiple cameras, and so that could be another benefit is if you've got multiple sources, put them all into one place first and then import in. That certainly makes a lot of sense. Can anyone comment on converting or importing from an Aperture library? I can give you a link that kind of has some really. It's probably more than just we could talk about. There's a lot, you know. There's a couple of steps.
It's an entire subject.
Yeah. So I'll post. Adobe has some great resources on that I can share in the notes on how to follow up on that.
We've got a few tutorials on photo focus as well about how to.
Yeah, that's right. When that came out, So we can hook you up with that. Ken's asking for advice on a graphics card.
That's very specific advice, Ken.
Yeah, 80% Lightroom, 20% Photoshop, driving 2 monitors, and where'd that question go? Did you just highlight it or something?
Here it is. I highlighted it to the top.
Okay. Oh, it just disappeared from me.
It should be the topmost one.
There we go. There we go. I see it. Driving 2 monitors at 2560 by 1440, and he's on a lot of.
That's
a lot of information
for us right now.
Yeah, right. Just get the most expensive one you can find. Yeah, I don't know, Ken. Sorry.
So we do have resources. I don't necessarily know how to answer your specific question. You know, if you had said 85% Lightroom, then maybe we could talk. But you know, 80% is just too low. Or even 90%. No, just totally joking. We do have some resources, and I can send them to you around this. I think it's a difficult subject just because each vendor and each card kind of does things a little bit differently. So we've got some resources that I can point you towards.
Yeah, if you have, Sharad, if you have any links like that, you want to just email me. I can post those for people after the show's over. I'm happy to do that.
Sure.
Robert's thanking us for the Hangout. That's great. And Sam's asking about new features that are in Lightroom CC, such as dehaze. Might they be included in the next version of Lightroom, whatever that might be? I guess the answer might is probably true. And I know Adobe doesn't like to say anything about what may happen in the future. Historically speaking, from my point of view, who's not an Adobe employee, is that typically yes, that you would see, you know, let's do something bad. That's just my not inside opinion, but just historically speaking, that's how we've seen things go. So that would be my hope. A couple more things have come in. No? Is that it? Lightroom does so much. Oh, David's saying. That's about it. All right. The last question for today. Lightroom might be able. Oh, he wants to know when. Dave wants to know when people might be able to meet him for a cold beer. He's thanking us for the Hangout. So. I'll be in Yosemite next week.
I was going to say, you know, we've got data that shows that most Lightroom people like wine. So, like, since you want beer, like, we just can't get you that. But, like, you know, totally making this up now. That's a great feature request.
Yeah. When you're getting that feedback via the app, is that part of what the feedback is? What people are drinking at the time they're using Lightroom?
No, but we can kind of look at trends, right? Like I think probably like 5 years ago, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, back when Facebook actually allowed us to do things like surveys and polls. One of the things that we had asked just to try and understand our customers, or at least our Facebook fans, a little bit better, was like, what are they doing when they're looking through their Lightroom photos? And we found that the vast majority of people were looking at their photos on Sunday night with a nice glass of wine. So, and I'm like, cool, like I can hang with these people. So
that's good. Yeah. Anyone else have any last import thoughts? If anyone watching wants to be entered in for the prize, make sure you get your comment or question or smiley face in. Helen, any last tips? mentions, comments?
Just what I say to my students is just literally spend some time in input dialogue and make sure you check where your photos are going. And look, I really liked what you said. I actually listened to the Victoria Brampton one, Rob. I was really impressed when you said about your file organizing in the sense of doing something that organizational-wise works for you, but also that's going to last for the future. I added that last little bit to my spiel because I learned it from you, and I think it's a really awesome idea. Is nobody else's organization system matters a hoot. It's really what works for you and what's going to work next year and the year after.
Yeah, you have to understand what you're doing. That's the bottom line. You have to know what you are doing. Nobody else can help you if you don't know what you are doing. Yeah, excellent. Levi, any closing tips, tricks, thoughts?
Yeah, my last. I think there's one really cool tool in Lightroom that has saved my bacon so many times, especially when I've done something like imported into 30 different folders all at once. And I just wanted to show it off really quickly as a super helpful little tool. And so I'm and clicking on myself. See my screen? Am I up?
Yeah. I see. Yes.
Yes.
I see.
Okay.
Yes.
So having just imported something, and then the default view is that I see the things that I just imported, but maybe I didn't put them where I thought I put them. Right up here on the left side in the library module, under the catalog, there's this little shortcut to, and these are basically collections, and it shows me previous import. And I can just click right there, and it takes me to where they are, and then I could right-click on a photo and right-click on a photo and go to folder and library, and then it shows me where I actually placed those photographs, and that's been a really helpful tool for me.
That's an excellent tip. As we're closing out, Levi, are you working on picking the winner?
Yes,
you got that queued up.
Work on picking a winner.
A couple more things came in. Sharad, any closing thoughts or import wisdom to share?
I don't know about wisdom, but just reiterating, you can make your organization as complex or as simple as you want. So think about it. It's probably something that it's like a 5-minute thought process. It's not something that's super complicated, but just be consistent. Because if you read my blog and it says, okay, use date-based. And you're like, oh, that sounds cool. And then you read Rob's blog and he's like, oh, no, dates suck, use events. And then you use events. And then Levi's like, no, guys, we can be friends. Let's do date plus event. And then Helen's like off in her own world doing something else. Everything's going to become a mess. So it doesn't matter which one you pick. Just pick something and be consistent. And if you do that, then 95% of your problems related to Lightroom import will likely go away. I wish 95% of your problems in general would go away, but I don't know if Lightroom's that important. We know it's important, it's not that important.
Yeah, one of my, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. One of my hopes for the future of Lightroom is that something can happen. Maybe this is what you were trying with the add functionality in the new import, is something that really helps people understand where their photos are. Like Levi's tip was very helpful. That's what I encounter so much is people don't know, and they really need that little extra help of understanding what is this import process about. There's some way to help them with that, and then some way to help them understand where things actually are residing on the hard drive. Because I can't tell you, I would not have a job if people understood that, I would put me out of work.
Now you know that. Now you know why we haven't done it, right?
Yeah,
we're trying to spur, we're trying to spur.
As much as I appreciate that, I really, for everyone else's benefit, I think it would be great if all the tears and hair pulling I've had to deal with over the years, not my own. So that would be great. So, Levi, you got a winner.
I've got a winner. It's Mel Rollery.
Mel.
And Mel
all right,
wins.
So Mel, you need to just chime in and say you're still here, and then send an email to levi@photofocus.com, and he will make sure you get that Photomatics code.
Right.
Will come in your email. So thank you very much to HDR Soft for sponsoring us this month, and thank you very much to Helen Bradley at projectwoman.com. Our lower thirds weren't working that well today, otherwise you'd see all that. But I'll put that in the event page, that Google Plus event page, where all this is going to be archived forever. I'll put a link to projectwoman.com where you can find Helen. I will put a link also to all the sites that I've mentioned so far today. And thank you very much, Sharad, for coming today and giving us that insight and your tips and your time. Anything that you want to email me, I'll make sure that gets put on there as well. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. And I see Mel has chimed in with the big yay in all caps, so she is here.
All right.
One last question Michael is asking, is it possible to get the full version of Lightroom to run on an iPad? No. So,
the easy answer. Yep.
That's the easiest answer we had today. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you next month with a new topic.
Thanks, guys. Bye.